mana to play more powerful cards.
And crucially, Fabian has 4 mainnet copies of Drill Bit. So if Corey is pinning all of his hopes on maybe a Urian as his big mid-game play or some other card to keep pace with the aggro starts, that Drill Bit could be big trouble for him.
Yeah, and I actually really, really like Corey's opening hand here. We see Glass Casket as well as Kaya Orzhov Usurper. Those are both going to play a big role in keeping Corey in this game.
This is the good half of that Orzhov Urian deck in this matchup for sure. And Fabian's hand is pretty good itself. He has turn 1 out of the Ebon Legion. He'll be able to follow that up with Fervent Champion and Drill Bit. And the issue with this Mardu Knights deck a lot of the time is the mana, where even though you have 12 Shocklands and Tournament Grounds, sometimes you just can't cast all of your spells or you can't sequence them in the way that you might ideally like to. And that can really slow you down enough for the opponent to get back in the game. But with this start so far, it looks like he has most of what he needs. He still does need a second red for that Embercleave, but he has a turn or two to find that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a spot where it's basically going to come down to whether or not Fabian can actually kind of assemble this 1-2 combo while Corey's still trying to set up what he wants to get onto the battlefield.
And we see the Drill Bit there, taking a look at Corey's hand, and he'll be sad to see, there are several good candidates for him to take it. This isn't an automatic choice.
Yeah, it's really close. Going for the Kaya over the Glass Casket is effectively acknowledging that no matter what, those are both removal spells, but Kaya's going to get multiple cards, whereas Casket's only going to get one.
And we see the Fenlurker eats the Embercleave that Fabian cannot cast yet, leaves him both that third land and the Rotting Regisaur. And the fact that this deck hinges quite heavily on Regisaur when it does need to raise means that it's built in such a way where you can function with quite few cards. You don't need to have a full grip. You're looking to get on the battlefield as fast as you can. So these effects, like Yarok's Fenlurker, not as good as they would be against maybe a growth spell deck that's looking to hit its first 5 or 6 land drops and then do things from there.
Exactly.
So we're coming in for some damage, and Knight of the Ebon Legion will get another counter, and there is the mighty Burglar Rat making its first appearance here on the broadcast.
Look, it's just out here doing its best.
And Doom Foretold will eat the Knight of the Ebon Legion, and we see that Corey's deck is built in such a way where he has these disposable permanents, like the Fenlurker, like the Burglar Rat, which you're perfectly happy to sacrifice to the Doom Foretold. By the time you're doing that, they have already done their job.
And now you reach this scary portion of the game if you're in Fabian's seat, where if you cast spells, you just lose them. And if you pass the turn, you skip your turn.
Yeah, and we see there, Corey takes the first game very quickly. Fabian out of resources. He knows that the game is not getting much better from him from there. And so we will already be moving over to sideboarding here.
Right, and that's just a spot where Fabian saw the writing on the wall, and especially when you're playing a tournament like this, you know it's going to be long. You have the whole Swiss, you have the top 8. If you're going to succeed, you want to make sure you kind of just take your losses in a spot where they're going to hit you less hard.
And especially with open deck lists, there's no consideration of, I'll play on for a few turns to see what my opponent has in their deck. It's right there in front of you. You have that convenience, and you can do with that information what you like.
Exactly. Sometimes you don't need to play for that 1% if you just want to get breakfast. Absolutely. I respect it.
So looking at the sideboarding here, what jumps out to you about both Corey's sideboard and Fabian's sideboard?
So the big thing in Corey's sideboard that I really like, and you see him immediately shoving those into the deck, are those copies of Kaya's Wrath. Those are the things that allow Corey to actually get a +2, a +3 in terms of card advantage, and catch up on the battlefield all in a single card.
Is there any consideration to bring in his own Rotting Regisaurs, which are not earmarked for this matchup, but those are consistently the biggest threat on the board? That's the entire point. And so if you play that on turn 3, often that will brickroll your opponent's entire offense.
The big issue is that if Fabian just doesn't attack into it, it will eat up Corey's own resources out of his own hand, and it will very rarely be able to attack Fabian until the game is already locked up. So I'm not surprised to see it stay in the sideboard here.
Oh, and this looks like a very impressive hand for Fabian. The double Fervent Champion draw, which is often the scariest thing you can see out of the Mardu Knights deck, with the Embercleave as this mid-game finisher. But then on Corey's side, he has that curve of Glass Casket into Oath of Kaya. And I'm a little surprised to see Treacherous Blessing still in his deck. You know, he doesn't have the time necessarily to leverage those cards, and the life loss is a big deal. But again, when you have 80 cards in your main deck, you don't have that many good things to bring out all of the time.
Right, and a big point here with Treacherous Blessing is it's a good way to refuel once you've traded a bit.
And if one Treacherous Blessing is good, I don't know how good the second one is. But we will see the second Fervian Chaplain, I imagine, come down in short order, uses this opportunity to get that tapped Survive Triumph into play, fixing his mana for the future turns, and 4 damage will crunch in, putting Corey to 15.
Love a good pair of Goblin Guides.
Absolutely. And so I have to think one of those is getting trapped in a glass casket.
At this point, you kind of have to assume that's the case. Corey ideally wants to save Glass Casket for something like Rotting Regisaur, but he's just under so much pressure here, especially on the draw. You can't just sit on your hands forever.
And under the old companion rule, if Corey could get to turn 5 and immediately play his Yorion to, let's say, blink that Oath of Kaya, maybe there would be some consideration to saving it. But now, when you have to take a full turn off and spend 3 mana to get the Yorion in your hand, I don't know if that's tenable anymore.
Exactly. At this point, you're really just trying to bridge the gap towards those later turns of the game. And we can see Corey kind of making moves here to just conserve life and let things work themselves out as the game naturally progresses.
And we see Fabian passes with 2 mana up, able to play that Black Lance Paragon end of turn. And the Paragon gives the Mardu Knights deck an element of instant speed play, which it doesn't really have otherwise. Normally, it's just unloading its hand as fast as possible in its main phase, getting all of its threats onto the battlefield. But if your opponent passes with 2 mana up, maybe it's a Paragon, maybe it's just a weak hand, or maybe it's something like a Heartless Act.
Right, and this is a position where you see Corey kind of weighing if he wanted to cast that Oath of Kaya or not, but really, he's just trying to bridge to that late game. He needs to get things off the battlefield.
Mm-hmm. And we see Fabian cycling the second Triumph here. And this is an issue that the Mardu Knights deck can have sometimes, where it doesn't have a way to refill itself. It doesn't have one of those aggressive curve toppers like an Experimental Frenzy or a Planeswalker that can generate this mid-game advantage. So it essentially has to commit to all-out aggression and hope that that is enough to finish the job. And if it isn't, then you get into these spots like this, where you have a bunch of lands and maybe 1 or 2 creatures left, which aren't looking that impressive, and you have to hope to seal the game with something like the Embercleave that we see in Fabian's hand.
Well, with all those lands, it really doesn't take that much for Embercleave to just put the game out from this point.
Right, and Corey has 4 cards in hand, but 2 of those are Treacherous Blessings, which are really not what the doctor ordered here.
Right, and Kaya isn't doing that much more either in the face of a 2-mana 3/1.
So this might be a good chance to just get that Yorion into your hand.
Yeah, this seems like a position where you just need to do something along those lines, or else you're just never going to have a line that actually gets you out of this.
He could also pass and maybe with the aim of doing something like activating a castle next turn or whatever, but I think that's just too small ball. I think getting the Yorion now, and he's essentially putting the gauntlet down to Fabian, saying, okay, you need an impressive play right now, or this Yorion can threaten to end the game.
Right, and you can see Fabian saying, all right, it's now or never. Let's Embercleave this up. Let's just push through any damage that I can get in.
Oh, and that is a clutch Elspeth Conquers Death from Corey, taking care of that Embercleave permanently if he wants. But for now, he doesn't even need to do that, because there is 1 threat on the board, and the Oath of Kaya will remove it. So unless there is a haste threat, which can only really be Fervent Champion, Corey knows he's in the clear. He'll have a turn to breathe and then remove the Embercleave next turn.
Right, this is a position where Corey's got to feel good about his position, especially as a 4/5.
And Corey knows when the draw bit took his D-Spark, he knows there's an Embercleave coming. That can only really mean one thing, and so he'll be sequencing his plays accordingly there.
Right, and this is a position where Fabian's really doing his best to try and sequence around what he can, but it feels like Corey's found what he needed to find in just blinking this Oath of Kaya over and over.
And we do see Elspeth Conquers Death takes down the Embercleave, leaves Fabian with 3 creatures in play, but none of them can attack profitably into that Yorion.
Right, something like a Lord off the top or an Embercleave or what he needs to find here.
That is a Lord off the top, so that will make things a little more interesting. And
honestly, this is getting close.
Yeah, and Fabian knows that there's no point sitting back. He's fine losing a creature at this point just to get a few damage in.
Right, and we see 5 damage coming across here and having to block a Venerable Knight, which is just going to make things a little bit worse on the battlefield.
And Corey is down to 4 here, so he would love a land, which would let him eat the Fervian champion with the Kaya and also mortify something else. But instead, he draws a Doom Foretold, which is great if the board is at parity or if both players have a bunch of things. In this position, it's really not what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, really, Corey needs to be able to get something together that can actually just catch him up on this battlefield. As it stands, he's pretty close to just facing lethal. Just one good card off Fabian's library here is going to put us into a game 3.
Yeah, the prognosis might seem good for Corey right now, but there are lots of cards Fabian can draw that do change that and end the game on the spot.
And it feels like Corey's just going to lean into this Mortify here to try and get something at instant speed. This also represents a castle activation, so it's hard to play around if you're on Fabian's side.
Yeah, the fact that Corey is buzzing here doesn't actually tell you all that much in the end. And Fabian, I think, needed something good on this turn. Instead, just draws a 6th land, which is not doing much for him here.
Dang. See, really, it's just kind of backwards, right? Corey wanted a 6th land, Fabian wanted anything but. It really is just a cruel world for both players here.
Yeah, if only Fabian could donate that Blood Crypt over to Corey. And so we'll see the 3 creatures come in, and yeah, Fabian knows he has to do this. There's no other choice here.
Corey just accepting that he's going to have to fire off this Mortify, and if the opponent has a copy of Embercleave, that may just be it.
With that in mind, would you maybe block something else of the Orient and then Embercleave the Shieldbreaker?
I'm sorry?
Well, Corey's a 3, and there is a 6 land to turn too late, but Elspeth Conquest sadly does not get to return anything here, but Kaya will eat the 1 remaining creature on the battlefield, or just gain Corey to life, given that currently the Fervian champion is a 1/1 that poses no immediate threat.
Right, this is a position where Corey just wants to try and get a little bit of padding to his life total, especially with this Yorion in play. There's no single card that Fabian can rip off the top that will slam the door shut.
And he even feels safe enough to play that Treacherous Blessing, which it lives up to the name sometimes. And with Corey at 5 life, that is somewhat perilous, but he feels he has the room to do it here.
All right, actually, I think it's time for Doom Foretold to make an appearance.
Yeah.
It's possible Oath of Kaya comes down just to maybe give a little bit more of a life buffer, but Corey has so many cards, so many resources, and now so many lands that it just feels like the world's his oyster.
Yeah, Doom Foretold will eat the 1 remaining creature if he wants to, or he can just play a redundant Oath of Kaya, take out the Paragon, go up to 7, and pad his life total even further. Yeah, he does get to play the Doom Foretold. Gets to have it all.
Kaya's actually a really good way to offset this Treacherous Blessing here. That Embercleave coming a turn too late for Fabian.
Yeah, and that's going to do it. So yeah,
kind of unreal. That felt a lot closer than it actually looked at the end. I know it was ultimately a 2-0 victory for Corey Baumeister, but it felt like Fabian was 1 or 2 cards away off the top that whole time. Remember, he got Corey down to being 1 creature, 1 Embercleave, a couple points of damage, etc., short of actually sending us to a game